Hello, I'm Sherelle Cruikshank, the proud executive director of Include NYC. For those who may not know much about us, Include NYC is the leading provider of training and information for young people in New York City with any disability from birth to the age of 26 for their families as well as the professionals who support them. As a citywide nonprofit, this past year, we assisted more than 16,000 people, and we reached more than 400,000 New Yorkers through communications and community outreach, all free of charge to our participants. We envision a world where there is love, equity, and access for all young people with disabilities. Advocacy has always mattered at Include NYC. However, advocacy is not only for people who identify as advocates, because the independence, well-being, and life success for people with disabilities depends on public policies and laws. We know how important it is for each of us to get involved. The actions of everyday people matter, and each one of us has a role in helping people lead the kind of lives they want to live. But many of you have found yourself wondering, what does advocacy mean to me? And how can I make a difference in a way that fits my life and capacity? I know that I have had that thought for myself. I'm excited to kick off our series of conversations on advocacy. What does it mean to you on our Disabilities Inc. podcast? And this is to encourage members of our community to see what they can do, even if they've never done advocacy before, or at least so they think. This series will present the voices of a community organizer, an elected representative, and a powerful parent. Our first guest today is Sayde Campoamor, the Chief Equity Officer at the New York City Comptroller's Office. Hi, Sayde, how are you?
Good afternoon. Good to be here.
Thank you for being with us.
Absolutely.
So can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and also what's the role of the Chief Equity Officer in the Comptroller's Office?
Absolutely. First, huge shout out to Include NYC and all of the parents and families who have children with disabilities. Until we have a fully inclusive public education system, I know I will not rest. And so we're lucky to have you as an advocate. And we're lucky to have Include NYC as an organization, as a mainstay in our city. So thank you.
Thank you.
What's up, everybody? I'm Sayde Campoamor. I use the pronouns she, ella. I identify as Indigenous. I was born in Central America. I was raised right here in New York City by a single mama. I'm a public school kid, K through 12, New York City public school education. I'm now a public school parent. I'm on the school leadership team. For a long time, I worked at the New York City Department of Education, working as a parent organizer, working with families and communities. And it's really nice to walk the walk. I identify as an artist, as a gardener, as a Virgo, as an anti-racist, a community organizer, a policy expert, specifically public policy related to education, of course, equity, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm a facilitator. Particularly proud of all the facilitation that I've led across the city in small groups and big groups around racial equity, around school diversity and integration, which often includes making sure that our classrooms are welcoming to our children with disabilities. And right now I serve as Comptroller Brad Landers, the New York City Comptroller Brad Landers, Chief Equity Officer. And in essence, the Comptroller is a citywide elected office, so was elected by 5 boroughs. Everybody got to vote for him. He is the chief financial officer, sort of New York City, the chief accountability officer to the mayor and to the mayoral administration. We do audits here, we register contracts here, and we manage and invest the pension funds of almost 800,000 retirees, our firefighters, our teachers, our nurses, people like me. So it's an awesome job. And the way that I approach the job, so what does Chief Equity Officer mean here, is, our lens is fiduciary responsibility and making sure that New Yorkers are properly accounted for all of the dollars and cents that we spend and that we owe and that we pay, all that stuff. And in essence, I have to say that there's a staggering cost to racism, that there's a staggering cost to discriminating against institutionally oppressed, historically oppressed and marginalized New Yorkers. So keeping an individual on Rikers costs New Yorkers nearly $500,000 or over $500,000 a year. Keeping a family in shelter can cost New Yorkers up to $300,000 a year. Hospitalizations as a result of mental health crises can cost New Yorkers $150,000 a year. When we don't properly invest in interventions like affordable housing, social workers, public safety that really keeps our communities safe, as well as mental health and health opportunities, healthcare, all New Yorkers pay the price, right? And those are just a few examples, but it expands to that. So I ask my colleagues and I ask of myself to apply an equity lens to the work. And equity is not a destination. There's no 8-point plan out of racism. It's a process, and it's an inclusive process.
Absolutely.
So that's what I
Absolutely.
do. That's how I approach the work, and that's a little bit about who I am.
Yep, and it also costs New Yorkers more when we don't invest in our children early, and ensure that they have the tools that they need to be most successful as they get older.
That's absolutely
Um,
right.
so tell me when you first was introduced to advocacy and started to believe in the need for advocacy.
Sure. Well, let's start with what do we mean by advocacy, right? It is moving people to act in for policy or for politics, politically, for changes that we want to see. There's 3 different types of advocacy, right? There's self-advocacy. I am Sadie and I deserve, or I need my speech therapy, or I need my occupational therapy, or I need to have a one-to-one for certain periods of the day, right? There's advocacy on behalf of the self. There's individual advocacy. Little Sadie or other person, my son or my sister or, an individual needs to get what the services or the changes or the policy that they need. And then there's system advocacy. All children in New York City should have access to speech therapy, occupational therapy, literacy coaches, whatever interventions or services that they may need. That's the type of advocacy. Anyone can be an advocate for themselves, for someone that they love, and it usually takes a bit more research and focus and organizing and coalescing around systems advocacy, but that's also really where I've lived in, right? Whether it was breakfast in the classroom or universal free lunch for all of our students in the city, pre-K, restorative justice practices and expanding restorative justice coordinators in the district, social workers, and the list goes on. But that is sort of how I started, but also important how we approach it. It's characterized by doing something for somebody else, usually, not always for just themselves, which is a little bit different than organizing, where you go into an impacted community and you give them martial tools to them so that they could do that work, and they should be able to steer that themselves. But it's a both and. They're interchangeable. There's advocacy that's based in geography, right? Everybody in East New York should have. There's advocacy based in issue, speech therapy for all. There's advocacy also based on population. So all 3rd graders should have this, or it can also be based around religion or different groups, etc. Right? Again, issue based.
So a lot of people will say that they don't have a voice. What do you say to that?
That's a great question. The world is really heavy right now. So I'll lead with lift what you can. Like, get hydrated, get rest. We're really no good to others or even ourselves if we're not grounded in those practices of some sort of wellness and nourishment for ourselves. The second is that, we hear the term power and often think power over or power is bad. And I just wanted to lift up that there are 4 different types of power. And this sometimes helps, again, ground me when I think about how do I want to use my voice. So there is power over, which is the bad power, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's power with, right? When I'm working with you, Sherelle,
Mm-hmm.
you and I have different skill sets, and together we have even more strengths together. There's
Okay.
power within. I believe I have something to say. I believe my family deserves this. I believe my school deserves this. I believe that all teachers deserve that, whatever. So there's power within, power with, and power to. And there's always power to do something. We can't do that if we're not hydrated and we're not well rested, but there's always power to. So a power over, power within, power with, and power to. And those are really helpful because everybody at some point has a sphere of influence. And you don't need to take it all on at once. But generally, those are sort of helpful outputs. Like, what can I do literally tomorrow? What is a short-term goal, intermediate, and long-term goal? And also, joining forces is really helpful. So again, I will just lift up power with, that happens to be my favorite. But of course, all of them need to work interchangeably. But yeah, find where it's warm, find people that are doing this work, ask them, what are they saying, right? You don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you feel like, oh, wow, I'm going to jump on the cause. People have been doing this and are doing it. So get supported, support yourself and offer your support. That's sort of how I like to sort of think about equity as an ecosystem that we're all playing our role. And I don't need to do everything all the time, but also
Mm-hmm.
there's always an opportunity to lead and there's always an opportunity to learn. And when you connect those two, I feel like it's helped ground me and helped me find my voice.
Okay. That's good to know. So your LinkedIn says that you're a community organizer. Is that the type of advocacy you're drawn to? And if not, what is the type of advocacy that you're drawn to?
Oh man. Okay. So community organizing cultivates authentic relationships and has that be the central building block to develop and cultivate power to affect change.
Okay.
Community organizing, the late and the great John Lewis said, we face danger with community. The late, great Audre Lorde said, there's no liberation without community, or there's no liberation without community. That's right. So it's like the prism that I see the world. And that's why I like the power with. So community organizing to me means you come together, you center people who are impacted, which often means center it's historically and institutionally marginalized and oppressed people, disabled people, Black people, trans people, non-English speaking people. When they're at the center of public policy making, I think that all New Yorkers benefit. And that not only will that result in a more equitable system, a more excellent system. And the way that I do that is, right, cultivating authentic relationships, being in community. I've organized against school closures. I've organized for restorative justice practices, against suspensions, and punitive measures of discipline. I've community organized for more parent voice at the table, all types of different things. And now I do it, as a school leadership team member and in my job as well. But there's that's sort of the prism with which I move. It's like when we move together, when we form coalitions and community together, and lift up our needs and center what is going to be the most impactful, sustainable, effective things for us. Well, it's also fun. It makes the work a lot less lonely and a lot more joyful. So,
Well, it's
all
always good
about
to
that.
have a partner in whatever you're doing, right? So how do you actually do it? Like if you were to break down community organizing and advocacy into like, I don't know, 4 basic steps, what would you say that would be? Where do you start out? What do you
Ooh,
need to do? And how do you actually get it done?
sure. All right. It's community organizing. It's simple and it often is like the common sense thing. And also it's intuitive and it's an art and it's hard to bottle up. But meet people where they're at.
Okay.
Number one, meet people where they're at. If they're angry, hold space for that. If they're sad, hold space for that. If they are at the barber shop or can only meet at 9 a.m. on a Thursday, meet them where they're at. Number one, meet people where they're at.
So meet people where they're at. That's first. So now that you've met them where they're at, what do you do with them?
You gotta have an ask.
Okay.
You gotta have an ask. Will you join me for this meeting tomorrow night? Will you come to the rally on Saturday morning? Will you sign on to this letter to the principal?
Okay.
Have an ask.
So you're
gotta
having
meet
an ask
people
and
where they're
telling
at.
them why, right? So you're
Yeah.
answering the why question, right? Why this is so important, right?
Absolutely. You gotta have an ask.
And then what comes next?
And the last is you gotta follow up. Oh yeah, I'm gonna be there. Will you be? Hi, I'm calling to remind you. Hey, can I count on you to come over? I'll send the invite. Hey, I noticed you didn't accept the invite, or you did accept the invite. Reminder to turn on. So you really got to meet people where they're at, right? If you, as an outside organizer, right? I work for Brad Lander, and I hear that there's an issue with this tenant organization, and I'm coming in, and I'm telling you what you should be doing, and not listening to where you're at. Or I'm telling you, come and meet my office, and I'm not meeting you actually at your tenant association meeting. That's it. That's wrong. That
Right.
right. You got to meet people where they're at. That could be physically. That can be figuratively.
Okay.
You don't come into a space just presuming you know more. You don't. People who are the impacted communities have resources and have knowledge. So you meet people where they're at. You have an ask though, right? You don't waste people's time. Have an ask that makes sense and they can say yes or no, or you can reframe it and reshape it together,
Okay.
right? No, I won't sign on to the letter, but I will come to this meeting. Or I will come to this rally, but I'm not sure if I can tweet it out yet or exit it, whatever it is, repost it. So have an ask and you gotta always follow up. Okay.
And organizing, follow up. All right.
If you get 25 people to say that they're coming, assume that 10 are coming. And it used to be 50%, but that was pre-COVID. Now, really got to drill down. I get 500 RSVPs. I get 120 people in the room. It's really critical to always follow up.
That's with everything, right? When people are involved, you have to make sure that you stay invested and focus and follow up. Yes.
And listen, the other thing I'll say about organizing. So those are my sort of 3 steps. Okay. The other thing I'll say is this is my personal preference. I like to educate to organize rather than just agitate to organize. So when I was working on school diversity and integration, a lot of New Yorkers were like, we're in New York City, we're already diverse. We were the North. We didn't do that racism. We didn't do segregation. It was really important to remind people that we had colored school number 1, 2, and 3, that we had enslaved, that New York City was the 2nd largest slave port in the transatlantic slave trade, that Wall Street was an actual wall built by enslaved Africans to keep out the Lenape people and the British. So we absolutely did do segregation. We absolutely did do racism, and we 100% upheld it by law here. It wasn't even until 1820 where we didn't have slaves in New York State. And when we had written to abolish it, which was in 1799, it was written keeping in mind the slave owner, written for them, for their convenience. So it's really important to educate, to organize, as opposed to just, aren't you just so mad about this? Because if it starts to feel like a drag, it becomes a drag and people won't keep coming.
Very true. So when we think about our students with
Yes.
disabilities in
Yes.
advocacy, what do you see as the opportunities for them as students and or for their families?
What do I think of their opportunities for students and or their families for people with disabilities? Well, first, I don't need to tell you this, but an individual with disabilities can mean so much.
Absolutely.
So just breaking that down, and especially as an organizer, what do you mean when you say disabilities? When
Absolutely.
you talk
So
about your kid, that might not relate to my kid, but our kids both have disabilities, right? So it's finding common ground, but slowing down the conversation to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. In the disability realm in New York City, but really in general, the Department of Education, there's so much alphabet soup. There's IEPs and a 1-to-1 and a 1-2-3 and an ASD. So slow down. If you're a parent with a child with disabilities, don't be afraid to slow the conversation down and ask, what are we talking about? What do you mean? And if you are organizing in the community and someone's saying, I'm just mad because, whatever, don't also be afraid to slow down the conversation and say, what I'm hearing you saying is this, did I get that right? It's really, really important. Again, especially for children with disabilities, because disabilities is one of the only marginalized groups that any one of us can become a part of at any point of our lives.
absolutely.
Right now, I'm never going to become a Black person, and you're never going to become an Indigenous person, but I can absolutely, and my family member can absolutely become a part of the disabled community tomorrow. So that's
Absolutely.
another thing that I like to ground people with. And what else would I give to families? I always like to interrupt deficit models. I have to do it in myself, but I also try to do it in general, right? There were studies that showed a Black mother would come running into a principal's office and saying, I need to speak to you. And people would kick her out of the school because they think she was crazy. Wherein a white mother would do the exact same thing. And the mental model was, she really cares about her kid. So again, interrupting everyone's concept of disabilities, paying attention to the language, right? Even the history of the word handicap, which used to be all over buses, right? It used to be written
Yes.
into law, right? Even again, educate to organize. And reminding families of children who do not have disabilities that an inclusive city and an accessible city is a better city for all of us. Full stop. Interrupting the mental models of deficit thinking, right? People with disabilities, we're all different types of learners. Master
Absolutely.
teachers are called master teachers because of differentiation, which means that people with disabilities should implicitly be included in that conversation. That some of the best models of integrated classrooms are ICT classrooms, integrated co-teaching classrooms. Those are successful models where all students' academic achievement gets raised up. And then again, disability doesn't mean one thing or the other. I have a disability doesn't mean I don't read well. I have a disability doesn't mean I don't know how to be in community. I have a disability doesn't mean I lack I'm not going to say it, anything. So really disrupting that, that's sort of where I ground. And I've had to do that work as someone who is non-disabled, because I realize it's the day that I'm raising my voice to have every train station be accessible is the day that all New Yorkers are going to benefit. And so I want to center families with children with disabilities and center people with disabilities, but I also am calling on my allies who are non-disabled to step up and speak out, because we need all the voices at this table and there's plenty of room.
Definitely important to be in community with people that have the same mindset, whether they have the same issue or not, in believing in the same thing, right? Tell me about what kind of advocacy the controller's office does.
Interesting. So our middle name is fiduciary responsibility here. So our advocacy looks very different. We put out reports, we put out research, we put out data, and basically what we do is we use the tool of transparency to advocate for better outcomes for New Yorkers. We use the tools of policy recommendations to further the conversation or contribute to a conversation that may be happening. Advocates like you might not have access to some of the data that we have, both budgetary or numbers of use, right? This is a program, ASD, for example, is a really good program. People like you might reach out to our office and be like, how much, or is there an economic analysis that could say how much it's saving New Yorkers? We've done economic spotlights, again, grounded in that there's not just a moral imperative for social justice and racial justice, but there's a real economic one. People with disabilities are far more likely to be unemployed. People of color with disabilities are even further likely to be unemployed.
100%. The intersectionality definitely exacerbates any particular situation.
Right. And that keeps us and by us, I mean New Yorkers, but certainly people of color with disabilities in economic deprivation. When you're dependent on certain programs or public services, but you can only make this much, but if you make more, then you lose it, right? Those are the type of analyses that we can shine a spotlight on, that we can speak loudly about, grounded in a fiduciary lens, that might offer and again contribute to a conversation. We are not lobbying elected officials in the same way, though we do give testimony at council oversight hearings, as well as at the budget process throughout the state. So those are ways where we use our voice and we use the tools of the office to advance equity for New Yorkers.
Mentioning that, I think it's important to remind people that they can always attend various places, different forums where they can give testimony, and they have the opportunity to share experiences and why particular laws may be oppressive or wouldn't help their situation or situations for people like them.
That's right. Or laws that perpetuate disproportionate outcomes for our young people.
That's right. And that's why it's important for us to listen to those hearings, although sometimes they can be long, but it's important to listen to them and participate in them if you can, or at least write a statement if you're not one to stand in front and give your testimony, but still write a statement and submit it, right? So that your voice is being heard in that way.
That's right.
So you've given us a lot to think about, Sayde. So can you share an advocacy story where advocacy really made a difference?
Oh man. I don't even know which one to start, but
I was about to say you must have a million, right?
I have quite a few, and yet not nearly enough. Universal lunch is coming to mind. There was a coalition called Lunch for Learning, and they brought doctors, and they brought parents, and they brought educators, and they brought food nutrition folks, people who used to work in the kitchens in our schools, our school food workers, as well as union members. A multiracial, intergenerational coalition. And they made it so glaringly obvious, right, that when we do not have nourishment in our bodies, we cannot learn. We're exhausted. When we are only eating a bag of chips, when we know that 1 out of 9 students is living, in either shelter or doubled up, right, as a student in temporary housing, where there's food insecurity that's rampant, not to mention eggs being $12 right now. And this was back then, but so eggs were reasonably priced. But to bring us to the present, We need to feed our kids. And we just need to make sure we do it. And we don't need to have someone have a special ticket or someone have to sign up a special this, because there's stigma around the free. Man, what a powerful coalition of people. I was working for the chancellor at the time, Chancellor Carmen Farina, at the New York City Department of Education. And we met with this coalition a few times. And we really not only made universal lunch for all, but we started really upgrading our school cafeterias so they looked like places where you'd want to sit and eat. We'd expanded salad bars, we expanded access to salad bars, we expanded the menu, we expanded the dignity and honor that our school food workers deserved, by lifting them up in social media campaigns, but also because they serve our kids every single day and they deserve the respect that they hadn't gotten. Their campaign took something that was somewhat invisibilized, both the school food workers, the food, lunch in general, and kids who were living in poverty, right? We used to call free and reduced lunch kids, FRL. And they really made an impact, and we did that, and that was really something, and that was all because of those advocates. And those advocates, again, worked in partnership with us. We showed them what a beautiful school lunchroom could look like. They showed us that by putting food in the way that looks like a Whole Foods salad bar, that kids would eat it and that it would be a major return on investment. My son eats school lunch. And that was always something that's important to me. Like, if it's not good enough for my kid, it's not good enough for any kid. And it was an honor to be a part of it. And it's an honor to be a public school parent who sends her kid to school, and who eats the lunch there, and who says good morning and good afternoon to the people who serve their lunch. And we make sure of it. I'm a chief equity officer, but all this could be talking points if I don't treat my son and who serves him lunch, and how do I treat his teacher, and how do I treat my own mother, right? That's the equity work. That's the real work, for me. At least.
Absolutely. So it's formal and informal. It's weaved into everything we do. Equity should not be a thing. It should actually be a part of our life. Sounds like
practice.
What you're saying, and something that we at Include definitely believe, that with opportunities, our children and youths with disabilities having the same opportunities as everyone else gives them the opportunities for the best success. So we've talked about a lot today, and I'm really grateful to you for being our very first guest for this series of podcast discussions on advocacy. So if you could leave us with one thought around advocacy, around students with disabilities, around people having a voice, what would that thought be?
Just one? Okay. Well, look.
Okay, you can give me two.
If you're watching and if you're like, I want to be an advocate, I'm feeling motivated, I'm feeling inspired, I'm feeling fed up, I'm feeling feelings. That's awesome. Welcome to the arena. We need you at the table. We need you now. We need you urgently, and we need you exactly as you are. So get in community. There are other people fighting this fight. Get a timeline going. Get some message discipline, so that if me and you are working on the same campaign or for the same issue or advocating, we're saying this, we are rowing in the same direction. Build alignment with your colleagues in your community, right? So often conflict comes up not because we are in disagreement, but because there's values misalignment, right? I was raised to look at elders in the eyes. You were raised to not make eye contact, right? So just be patient. We need you exactly as you are. And conflict happens. It's natural. How can we make it be generative? Yeah, and
sounds like everybody can be
stay on message. Do not get off message.
Sounds like everybody can be an advocate, right?
Oh, 100%.
Put 100%. Your mind to it and share your thoughts around a particular position or situation. Yeah. Well, thank you, Sayde, so much for being our first guest on Disability Inc. and our series on advocacy. Sayde Campoamor, she is the Chief Equity Officer at the New York City Controller's Office. And Include NYC thanks you for being an advocate.
100%. It is a pleasure. And allies, please help carry the water for some of our families who have children with disabilities. We need you at the table. They need you at the table. Having a disability is not a deficit. It's a value add to our entire city. And I'm so proud to stand with you all and all of the work that you do at Include NYC. It's an absolute honor. An inclusive city for all is a better city for all of us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.